All right, we're going to go ahead and get started with today's webinar. Thank you all for making the time to attend. And today's webinar is about the impact and also giving you guys some tips around COVID-19, otherwise known as the coronavirus. So to get started, for those of you that don't know, my name is Liz Day. I am the Director of Digital Services at rezStream. I'm going on to my 10th year with the company, and I oversee the marketing and website design team. Something a little personal about myself is I am the proud owner of Teddy, which is my rescue pup that you can see in that picture. So for today's webinar, I just divided it into three major sections. The first is just kind of giving you all an update on where things stand with the industry and where we expect to see things go. Also break down some short-term strategies that you can start thinking about putting in play immediately, as well as ending off with long-term strategies and how we can assist in that recovery process. So with that, let's go ahead and move on to the industry update. So it's no big surprise that I'm sure you all know cancellations and people booking have definitely experienced both an increase and decrease. So obviously we're seeing an increase in cancellations across all of rezStream's software clients and a decrease in reservations being made at this time. That's largely due to safety concerns from those guests, and I'm sure you all have been experiencing dealing with those cancellation conversations. One thing that I do want to point out is we have been in a situation like this before. Although there are differences, we certainly can learn a great deal from the SARS outbreak and really kind of taking a closer look at the speed and length of that recovery process. So the coronavirus crisis is definitely unlike anything that the travel industry has seen before, but it's not going to last forever. And when things do start improving, the speed of that recovery could match the speed of the fallout. And this was pulled from a study that I had just reviewed yesterday from a company called MMGY. They believe that the recovery mindset will start to shift 45 to 90 days after the peak. And this is very similar to what we saw with that SARS outbreak, with the occupancy bouncing back really quickly after that peak, and once those travel restrictions started to ease. In fact, we can start to see that improvement take place in other countries, largely with China right now. So the US is largely kind of in that downturn right now, but you can see China is already starting to see a nice pickup in that recovery process. So it definitely gives us hope. Another example of a pandemic that we saw was definitely the effect that swine flu had on travel. Wanted to pull this chart because what I think is really great is that even though we saw some people canceling, which, you know, again, you guys, I'm sure have experienced so far, majority of those guests, you know, did just make arrangements and modify those existing travel plans. So that was either they just went ahead and delayed that trip, they decided to select another destination, which I think, especially with coronavirus and that largely impacting fly-in markets, a lot of you, I think what we'll talk about here in a bit is how that could really assist in you capturing more reservations from some of those surrounding areas that you're located near. And then again, kind of to that point, 22% of those decided to just kind of stay at home and decide to stay nearby. Now with that, kind of wanted to talk a little bit about some short-term strategies and some things maybe for you to consider looking into. So the first of those is the Paycheck Protection Program. So the Paycheck Protection Program is part of the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, otherwise known as CARES Act. This is a nearly $350 billion program intended to provide American small businesses with 8 weeks of cash flow assistance through 100% federally guaranteed loans. So if you're wondering, do I qualify? Yes, this applies to small businesses, sole proprietorships, independent contractors, and self-employed individuals. So as you'll see on this slide, a few things to just know about this program is there is no cost to apply. The funding is meant for you to be able to retain your employees, and that includes payroll, also anything regarding the actual business unit itself, such as rent, mortgage, or utility expenses. And this loan covers expenses dating back to February 15th through June 30th. And it can be forgiven and essentially turn into a non-taxable grant. So without going into more detail about that, it is something that you can go ahead and apply to right now. So I would just suggest making a point to talk to your banks and getting more information on that. So as far as short-term solutions, or short-term strategies, I should say, is one of the things you want to consider doing is adjusting that cancellation policy to encourage stay date adjustments for up to a year, or simply provide gift certificates in exchange. That will allow you to be able to keep that revenue on the books and avoid having to give the full cancellation refund. Now, for those of you that unfortunately have been forced to close the doors temporarily, depending on the location that you're in, you can block out availability in the booking engine. So we would certainly encourage you to do that. I know that that is a little unknown in terms of when that travel ban may or may not be lifted in your area, as things are changing every single day. But what I would suggest is closing out and maybe, at least allowing reservations to be made as early as June. And that applies to your direct booking engine, and you can also consider making some changes regarding availability on any third-party sites that you may be offering inventory to, such as Booking.com or Expedia. So if at all possible, we would strongly encourage you not to turn off that booking engine, because once you are just officially turning that off, you really are shutting yourself off from being able to receive any future reservations, which will certainly assist in that recovery process once things do calm down. Now, the other thing too to just be mindful of is, as you are implementing any flexible cancellation or policies, not only making that information available on your website, but making sure that information is available within your booking engine is very important. You also want to make sure that those policies are being added to any sort of email communication that you have going out when guests are making those bookings with you, so that they have those details in place. The next is we've had several properties making adjustments in terms of their check-in and check-out options. So, really considering if you do have guests still staying with you, adjusting any sort of check-in or interaction that they may have with staff to be low contact is really encouraged. That not only, helps the guests feel more safe and secure, but it also prevents any of your own team members or employees, if you will, from coming into contact with somebody that is potentially sick. There's also adjustments being made to when it comes to breakfast, if that's something that you're offering to those guests. And so instead of doing maybe a shared buffet, catering to those guests on a one-off basis, just to make sure, again, that there's not a lot of sharing and opportunities for germs to be spread. The other thing that we would encourage you to consider doing is across your website and the descriptions that those guests are reading when they're trying to consider what room, unit, cabin, what have you, indicating exactly what you're doing to keep those accommodations clean. And so just adding a sentence or two is worthwhile. That way, right off the bat, you're doing everything you can to reassure those guests that you're taking cleanliness very seriously, and you're letting them know exactly what you're doing to make sure that that stay is nice and safe. Another short-term strategy, I know that a lot of you may just want to discount just to assist with capturing any business possible. But really at this point, deep discounting won't make that much of a difference. Long-term, it can have a negative impact on your business. And people often perceive quality based on price. So selling your rooms too cheap will give travelers the wrong impression and harm your brand image. So please be mindful of when you are cutting costs that you're not doing any severe deep discounts, because that can have a long-term impact. What we've been doing across several properties based on their own responses amid COVID-19 is informing them on exactly what the property is doing to make sure that they're safe and healthy. Health is put first. So whether it's indicating exactly how you're handling those breakfast services or how you're, making those units clean, and anything additional that you're doing, having one dedicated page on your website is definitely something that we would encourage. And this can be brought to their attention, whether it's a button placed on their website or utilizing a pop-up window offering more details to that landing page. But having one page on your website not only will provide you with an additional page to optimize if you're doing search engine optimization, but it also is allowing you to be proactive and communicate exactly to those potential guests what you're doing to take this whole thing seriously. Now, as far as marketing, maintaining a voice with current and prospective customers is super vital during this time. Marketing really hasn't ever been so valuable. And, really kind of what you want to shift your focus on is those bottom of the funnel activities and doing everything you can to stay connected with those loyal guests. So when you think of tactics to continue investing time in, that would largely include search engine optimization, meta search sites such as TripAdvisor's Trip Connect program or Google Hotel ads, and especially social media and email marketing. So we've done a fair amount of email campaigns, again, sending out very similar message that we kind of went over in the previous slide with the landing page and explaining to properties and to potential guests exactly what they're doing in order to really take this whole thing seriously and to make a change where the guests are obviously top mind and kind of the first priority, if you will. Another thing to keep in mind is, research has shown that properties that do continue with marketing and advertising through recessions garner greater market share when that recession is over. So even if you can't keep it at the same level as you have been used to, at least keeping some form of marketing going is definitely the way to go versus cutting it off entirely. Now, if you're running pay-per-click campaigns or even a meta search campaign, if you will, such as TripAdvisor, you definitely want to make sure you're looking at the return on your investment. So looking at Google Analytics, understanding what's working, what's not. Certainly, if you are targeting locations that have travel bans, you want to make sure you're removing those so that your advertising dollars are really focused on those guests that truly can make the trip to you. Consider updating ad copy to focus on future stays. So if you are one of those properties that have had to close their doors temporarily, looking at updating those ads so that you're thinking forward and encouraging those guests to think past this whole coronavirus period and to encourage them to make that future stay with you is definitely worthwhile. And something else to experiment with is because people just naturally are going to be on their phones and looking at videos, looking at targeting those users in a different way, such as with mobile gaming and video on YouTube, that could be something worthwhile to be able to reach even more people, especially in this downtime. If you're a property that offers packages or considering offering packages, just make sure that they make sense for this time period. We definitely have, properties that are located up in Glenwood Springs, and, the hot springs is a really big draw for them. That's not necessarily going to be a good fit right now. So rethinking exactly what it is that you're pushing makes sense. If you have the option to offer additional services or partner with a local business, or you provide dining yourself, offering takeout options is definitely something to experiment with. And we've heard good feedback from those properties that have been making those changes. Definitely want to promote direct bookings. As you know, when you have guests that are going to you first and foremost, and they're going to your booking engine to make that online reservation with you, that not only is helpful for you because you get that really affordable reservation versus having to pay commission, but then I think, especially in these times when you're having to force those guests to contact, booking.com and Expedia directly, this is a really good time to reassure them, that in the future, working one-on-one with you is really ultimately going to provide them with that best customer experience. Now, kind of thinking forward and, thinking towards maybe, months of June, July, August, encouraging those guests to book early and get a small discount. Again, no deep discounting, but a small discount is something that can be effective. What we've seen work really well is if you are wanting to offer an advanced booking special, making sure that those guests feel very comfortable taking action with that is really what's going to get them over the hump. So a lot of that is going to come down to reiterating any sort of flexibility that you're providing when it comes to cancellations. And then from there, letting them know that, again, if you're not comfortable with encouraging them to stay right now, thinking in the next few months and encouraging them to do that by giving them a small incentive can be an effective way to continue capturing revenue. Now, long-term strategies, thinking a little into the future, leisure travel will definitely pick up first, followed by the corporate travel and then group travel. So a thing to consider putting together is a staycation package. And this is really going to be focused on those guests that can drive to you, not necessarily have to fly to get to you, but drive to you in order to get a special rate. So whether that's in-state residents, or nearby states where it's more feasible, that's definitely going to be something that will assist you in recovering quickly once travel picks back up. And, one, I think, encouraging thing to note is that in the last 2 years, we've seen some really nice increases in road trips in the U.S., and that will help, again, with those properties in the early months of recovery. And so road tripping versus flying is definitely going to be top of mind. Another thing to look at doing is reinstating any of those advertising budgets that you have had to kind of pull back on a bit. So if you do have Google Ads, slowly but surely working towards increasing that as you start to see that return build. Meta search, which is, again, TripAdvisor, Trip Connect program, putting more money towards that. So again, when people are taking action and look to visit you, when they're on your TripAdvisor listing, they'll be able to find that availability. They'll be able to see those rates that they like and be able to actually complete that reservation with you right then and there. Other long-term strategies, and something to just make note of, is that, travelers will expect something a little extra to lure them back. So anything you can do to make them feel special or unique is definitely going to be the way to go. So special pricing on those loyal guests that have visited you several times, and treating them the best first and foremost, to get them to come back because they've already bought into that brand, they've already bought into the experience, and they know for a fact that they like what they're paying for, is going to be something to consider. Also, if you can throw in any additional perks or incentives that don't necessarily cost you a whole lot. So early check-ins, late checkouts is definitely going to be nice. Maybe there's some free room upgrades that you'll be able to offer. And then if you are in an area that has a lot of local businesses or partners, that you can, partnerships that you can establish to enhance that overall guest experience, that will be worthwhile. So for a local or domestic traveler coming on a weekend getaway who has, maybe foregone their exciting overseas trip, try, tying in something along the lines of tickets to local attractions, and then bundling that in with that lodging. If these businesses are closed and that's something that you do still want to be able to offer as a package, you certainly can put together an itinerary, such as, here's the perfect picnic spot, or here's the nature walk that we would recommend, or even considering a self-guided tour. So with that, that concludes today's webinar. I really appreciate, again, you guys taking the time. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to email me at liz.day@rezstream.com. My phone number is 303-872-0214. I'm not going to take any questions on today's webinar, but again, if you do have any questions that you would like to get in touch with me about, there's my direct contact information. And we will be sending out the recording from today's presentation within the next 24 business hours. So with that, I will let you all get back to your day, and thanks again so much for attending.